100,000 female-led businesses in London. I was really struggling trying to find podcasts that didn't feel like power suits. For the love of God, get a business bank account. I stopped focusing so much energy on Instagram. Someone's reaction to your boundaries should tell you everything. At night at London Bridge, Leon is pretty much the only thing open. A lot of your friends do end up being business owners. We are doing it all from pitching ideas to workout classes, one oyster tap at a time. Hello and welcome to Coffee and Oysters, the London Business Babe podcast. My name is Frances Odera Matthews. I'm a certified Notion consultant and founder of the Notion Bar, as well as your host. On this podcast, we're going to cover everything from your favorite coffee shops in London to tech tools and your favorite business tips. This is the first episode, and so I thought I'd give you a bit of a background on the podcast, what the plans are for it, as well as just a way to get to know me. I've had a lot of people request to be guests, but you don't even know if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So I'm a podcast babe, but I was really struggling with trying to find podcasts that didn't feel like power suits, especially those aimed at women. Like, honestly, some of my favorite podcasts are ones where I just feel like I'm hanging out with my friends and they don't take themselves so seriously, even if they are giving good advice. And I just found that a lot of the podcasts out there just weren't very reflective of me and my friends in real life. They weren't relatable and they weren't attainable. Like, there were people making like millions and millions of pounds a year. And I feel like it's really important that you know what your next steps should be from people who are in a similar place to you. And also, a lot of the podcasts out there were quite similar industries. So it's women in tech who run a startup or they run a D2C brand. I want to learn about the girl who runs the nail shop. There are approximately 100,000 female-led businesses in London, and we all have a story to tell. We all have a story to tell that also isn't just business. We also have fun outside of work. And I won't lie, when I'm out with my friends at networking events, etc., we're not just talking about work, we're also just talking about like, where do we go to get our hair done, or where are our favorite coffee shops? And to be honest, like, no one is writing that information down. And I think that is a crazy opportunity to be had. I am most likely to do things when other people have recommended them to me directly. So in terms of what Coffee and Oysters is, it's a guide to London and business by us and for us. Episodes will be roughly bi-weekly. In each episode, I'm going to be interviewing a London business babe, just asking her about business and life and just how she survives. And I'm going to be tracking all of the conversations in the Coffee and Oysters guide, which you can find in the show notes, where you can literally click on each person's profile and steal their stack, because we all love a shortcut. So before we get into learning a bit more about me, I'm going to walk through the manifesto for this podcast so you can see if it's right for you, and then also shout some of you out. So I wrote a 10-part manifesto to define the kind of people that we're attracting. This is journalism. This is not necessarily a members club. I'm part of a few members clubs that I'll get into, and they already do a fabulous job. I would much rather see this as a resource where we can all trust that the information is good. So part one of this manifesto is that we balance work and life. We are doing it all from pitching ideas to workout classes, one oyster tap at a time. And that is actually where the name Coffee and Oysters comes from. So coffee is a thing that keeps us going, and then oysters as in Oyster card, but also a little double entendre on the fact that oysters are normally associated with living the soft life, the bougie life, whatever you want to call it. The next part of the manifesto is we keep it real. We'll share our wins, our struggles, and the tough lessons learned. No gatekeeping here. Number 3, we're explorers. We're not afraid to leave our comfort zone because growth never happens inside comfort zone. And we're always embracing new experiences, whether it's discovering new things or workout classes or pivoting our business. I don't know about you, but pretty much everyone I've spoken to these days is pivoting their business plan. But we'll get into that in episode down the line. Number 4, we weren't born to work. We are by no means hard workers. We are smart workers. Systems are our friends. We value systems and productivity, not for the sake of being productive and trying to do more, but actually that we can do less and live our lives. Number 6, we're simplifying the business journey. We break down the big goals into actionable steps. Number 7, we dress for ourselves, whether it's maxi dresses or cargos. Come as you are. Honestly, hustling through the Central Line at rush hour is an extreme sport. So whatever keeps you comfortable. And if you've got to put your heels in the backpack and switch for trainers, then so be it. Number 8, we celebrate our differences. We can learn from perspectives different to our own. And we not only value ideas from people deep into the game, but also people who are just starting out. Number 9, we are authentic. Real life is not the algorithm. If your favorite coffee shop is the greasy spoon down the road, then so be it. And number 10, we're our own cheerleaders and each other's biggest fans. Self-promotion is by no way bragging. It's a way of honoring our talents and inspiring others. We also take time to shine a spotlight on others because a win for one is a win for all. So those are the 10 points from the manifesto. I'd be really interested to see if anyone resonated with any of them in particular. You can always drop a message on YouTube or on Substack, wherever you're consuming this, or drop us a message on Coffee and Oysters Pod on Instagram. Moving on to probably one of the segments I'm most excited about. It's called Manifest Mondays, and I am a firm believer that you do not ask, you do not get. So if you are subscribed to the Substack, the link will be in the show notes, you will get an email called Manifest Mondays every Monday. And this is where I need us to dream big, tell people what you want. And essentially with each episode, I'm going to go back through the Manifest Mondays and pick my favorites. So shout out to the over 100 of you who've actually already signed up to the Substack. You're incredible. I've been sending this out for a few weeks, and so far I've gathered a few responses, and I just wanted to shout them out because you never know who might be listening. So the first shout out that I want to do is for Selena Coles, founder of Build Collective, who is manifesting a team of 5 2025 and also dreams of working with Virgin startups on community. It is so good to know when to outsource. So if you are someone who's looking to develop your work in community strategy or love the mission, reach out to Selena and we may actually have her on the podcast. The next shout out I want to do is for Brittany Marie, who is actually moving to Cardiff for school after playing around with the idea. This was actually a few weeks ago, so she may have already done this, but also just shout out to you. Taking a leap of faith, especially when you're stuck in a situation where you feel stuck, is scary, but it's also a sign of self-respect. You are brave enough to do things that will take you to the next level. So shout out to you, Brittany. And then finally, I want to shout out to Sujan, who's also a Notion consultant, who laid out some very specific goals and metrics. Very much rooting for you. And I just want to say that Brittany and Sujan are not actually official London babes, but we are all London babes by heart. And I fully embrace the international community who is supporting this podcast. I may do international editions of this down the line because I mean we all travel, right? So if you want to be shouted out in the next Manifest Mondays segment, please subscribe to the Substack and speak your truth. Now we're moving on to the interview portion of this, which in the future will be the bulk of the podcast. Today I'm technically interviewing myself. The 4 main things that we're going to cover: business journey, your work and life tools, your London jebs, and hopes for the future. So my business journey is a bit wild. So I've always been a fixer. I've got over 10 years of project management operations experience in the mainly creative world, because if we know something about creatives, they are, generally speaking, quite chaotic. So I was always the person that implemented systems that made our lives easier. I was working for a UX agency in the States. I actually went to college in the States, but that's another story for another time. And I was Google Docs queen at the time. Like, give me a Google Sheet, I'm your best friend. And then all of a sudden I fell in love with Notion after essentially being forced to learn it. And I was like, wow, this has changed my life. I unfortunately did not get my visa renewed. This was very much Trump era, and I was an international student. It was very difficult to stay. So I had to come back to the UK. And Notion actually landed me my next job as a senior project manager for a Shopify agency, where I ended up essentially halving my workload by building out client portals. And eventually I got a bit bored. Something that I realized about myself was that I really like creating the process. I don't really like doing the process. So as I was becoming more and more frustrated with my job, I took a leap of faith to become a Notion consultant. I was side hustling for a year. Eventually, I took the leap of faith and gave myself a 3-month notice period to leave my job. I felt like at the time, 3 months was enough time for me to like figure out my ish, but short enough a time for me to like kick my backside into gear and like get systems in place, push out more content and find clients essentially. And you know what? I did it. I think a real blessing for me at the time was having a bridge job. So a bridge job is something where you can just like do to tide yourself over and pay your bills, but isn't necessarily directly connected to your passion, so that you just save all your brain space for doing your passion. And to be honest, I'm not allergic to getting another bridge job, even though I am full-time freelancing now. Maybe this will be my bridge job. Holla, sponsors. But essentially, I had a bridge job as a podcast assistant, ironically, for Techish. Big shout out to the Techish crew. So I did that for a few hours a week and essentially just paid my bills. I was living up north at the time in York, so rent, etc. wasn't too expensive, luckily. So it was just the perfect situation. I'm coming into my 5th year of being a Notion consultant, and it's crazy to say that I've even lasted that long. What is it, that statistic where most businesses fail within the first 3 or 4 years? So for me to be in my 5th year earning money off my own back, I'll give myself a pat on the back for that one. And you know what? This is my first time running a business by myself. I've definitely made some mistakes 5 years in, and I'm only just starting to iron out the processes and like actually have a strategy and create flywheels. If you're a service provider and you don't know what a flywheel is, please Google it. It will change your life. But essentially, the biggest mistake that I made was I was focusing on trying to do way too many things at once. And then also, instead of focusing on my strengths and my personality, to be honest, and what people gravitate to me for, I was trying to fit the box of being kind of a stuffy tech service provider for the longest time. And I was trying to be like really serious. I think my original brand colors were like blue or something, which is just, if you've met me, like I'm not a blue clean corporate kind of gal. You know what? It just wasn't working. So I rebranded once a few years ago, and then I rebranded again towards the start of the year. And what I found with every rebrand is that I've grown closer and closer to showing up in a business sense that feels more authentic to me. So a big strength that I've realized is that I'm great at connecting with people in terms of like teaching them and making concepts really accessible. So now the main thing that I'm focusing on in my business is a monthly group coaching academy for Notion, with the idea that instead of spending like 20 hours a week, that's 1 hour a day, 5 hours a week for 4 weeks, you spend like 90 minutes a month with me spoon feeding you information. And I'm really looking forward to it because I get a chance to teach people Notion at an accessible price point. And so if you imagine that's 20 hours a month, let's say your hourly rate is £100 as a freelancer, that's £2,000. Instead of hypothetically essentially spending £2,000 on trying to figure out Notion, you're spending $29.99 a month, essentially. If you're interested in the Academy, you can find that in the guide or the show notes. And so as well as this Academy, which really speaks to my teaching abilities and just wanting to help people in an accessible way, I've also realized that I need to time block everything I do. The concept of VIP days, 5-hour sprints, have kind of changed my life. Clients are very receptive to like, okay, I've got you for the whole day. We're going to get X, Y, Z done. So that has really helped just transform my business and start to fall back in love with it again, as well as this concept that I'm also focusing on of the 5-day workspace, where I realized that in the productivity sphere, there is this tendency to try and do everything at once. And so for the longest time, I was taking on these massive builds of companies, like 60, 70 person companies, wanting to do everything at once. But ethically, I don't like going down that route anymore. When you try to build a whole productivity system at once for project management, operations, etc., what have you, what happens is that onboarding is kind of a nightmare. And so what's better is if onboard people onto the phase 1 stage of your workspace, so the most important bits in it, get people used to that, iterate it, and then build on top of it. So I now only do workspace builds in Notion 5 days at a time. And I found that doing this like 5-day workspace method, so that's 25 hours, 5 days for 5 hours at a time. And it's kind of the perfect amount of time to build out a Notion workspace that is thorough enough in terms of functionality, and you've had time to go through discovery and everything, but also a short enough amount of time that forces you to think about what your priorities are and not try to onboard yourself too quickly. And then lucky in that process, I've built in one of my other like service provider secret weapons of templates. So I have a base template that I work off that's already optimized for essentially like product management, Notion and UX and UI, best practices, etc. So that saves a lot of time as well. And in this new way of working, I'm teaching time boxing and really pushing mindful productivity. So that's the big pivot. As I mentioned, it kind of feels like everyone is doing the big pivot at the moment. So we've spoken a little bit about my business journey, but now I want to chat a bit more about the things that I literally cannot live without, and some things I've had to teach myself along the way. Boring stuff that no one tells you about, like taxes. If you are thinking of starting a business, for the love of God, get a business bank account. I personally use the Monzo business account. I pay £5 a month, and what it does is that it essentially any money that comes into my business bank account takes 20% of it straight away and puts it into a tax saving pot that gathers interest until it's time to take money out for taxes. My next hire will be an accountant / bookkeeper, someone who can basically just tell me, like, should I be a sole trader or an LLC? Like, someone to file my taxes every year, keep an eye on the tax bands, like, am I putting enough tax aside, essentially? I'm doing all of that myself at the moment, and I can do it, but I do not want to do it. and then eventually, once my flywheels start kicking in, I'm going to be hiring an assistant for this podcast to do all of the admin, essentially, like updating the guide, doing a rough edit of the video and uploading things to like YouTube, the Substack, etc., etc. And also immersed myself in the world of sales and copywriting and marketing psychology. And if you don't understand the concept of these three things, it's going to be really hard for your business to grow, whether you are running a nail shop or a tech startup. Newsletters, podcasts, follow cool people on LinkedIn, whatever it is. I will say, hands down, two of my favorite newsletters for marketing psychology are Nick Calendar. I'll put this in my guide. He's kind of a genius at like breaking down marketing psychology concepts. I think something that I took from his newsletter once is that complicated services sell better at weird price points. So instead of saying like all of this for $5,000, say like all of this for £297. And because it's a complex number, people see the value in what they're getting as being complex. Anyway, so Nick Calendar's marketing newsletter, and also Neil from Demand Curve. I will be shouting out some gals, but those are my two guys that I go to that aren't like icky. In terms of things that legitimately move the needle for me, I stopped focusing so much energy on Instagram and pouring it into LinkedIn instead. So the people on Instagram, they're kind of there to switch their brains off a lot of the time. They're not really in the mindset to work. And so I post way more on LinkedIn than I do on Instagram these days. And I mentioned earlier about templating everything. So pretty much everything that I have in my business is templated. So the templates I regularly use with my Notion clients, or even just process checklists for myself. This really removes the mental load for when I go to do things. I literally write out every single step. And so it takes the emotion out of it and just like allows me to do it essentially. And also it's great if I ever onboard an assistant. I try to not limit business to like what you're known for. A lot of my friends who also run their own businesses also have side hustles. So even myself as a business owner, I write articles sometimes. I just ghostwritten a Notion article for another tech provider. And I'm also occasionally a commercial model. You may see me on social media soon for a pet food brand, but you know what? It pays the bills, and sometimes it's just really nice to turn my brain off. I also know friends who cat sit or dog walk, you know, things where you're not looking at a screen, and that extra supplemental income really helps ride out the rough times. So you've got something else to kind of rely on. And to be fair, I saw my dream life when I was on a shoot a few weeks ago, where it was this beautiful house in northwest London, and the mummy lived there, just dropped the kid off at school, and the film crew was renting the house for the day essentially. And I was like, this is the goal. This is goals right here. I'm gonna eventually have a beautiful, beautiful house that we own, and we're just going to rent it out to film crews while I can choose to work or not. In terms of routines that keep me sane, I've got this weird addiction to Duolingo at the moment, and I love different languages. I feel like languages open you up to the world. I'm learning Spanish, which I already kind of know. I've been speaking Spanish since I was 11, did a class every semester at uni, studied abroad in Spain, etc. But I'm really just doing it on Duolingo to not lose it. But I'm also doing Brazilian Portuguese because I really want to go to. It's such a selfish thing, and I love Brazilian music as well. So like bossa nova, samba, Brazilian disco slaps. I'm also learning French. My partner is half French, and so it doesn't hurt. But the weird thing I found from doing Duolingo every day is that, yes, it's great to learn the new languages, but it's also a way of like tricking my brain into knowing that it can do hard things and I can get better at things that I'm not good at, which helps me push myself business-wise, if that makes any sense. And so Duolingo is a daily habit for me, as well as I have a system set up in my Notion workspace where it shows me due invoices or people that I need to follow up with for pitches. So I message them daily as well. When it comes to weekly habits, Fridays are my admin days. I do not take clients on these days. And I actually figured out a whole content strategy on the content that I'm going to put out and which Friday I'm going to batch them on and schedule. So Fridays are my days where I need to get stuff done. One thing I'm looking forward to removing from my Fridays, I call them the Friday drives, is the bookkeeping element, because oh my gosh. Then on Saturdays, I paint my nails. It's really therapeutic and it forces me to stop and meditate in a way. And I can catch up on my podcasts and my shows. It's just really a way to turn my brain off. I have realized I am not a wellness girly. I've tried so hard. So yoga and meditation, I've really tried, but I don't think it's for me. But this is a way that I could almost meditate and turn my brain off. I'm a big advocate for just doing what works for you, and this is what works for me at the moment. And then finally, if you're on YouTube, you'll see that I have some beautiful carnations here and a weird system that me and my partner have developed is we get a bouquet of carnations from Lidl every 2 weeks. And so when this bouquet starts dying, we're oh, it's a nice visual reminder of oh yeah, oh yeah, that we should go shopping this weekend. And so it's just a cute little thing that we throw into our routine. I'm actually all for pro-funtivity instead of productivity. So pro-funtivity being adding layers of play into your workflow while being realistic about the things you can get done. And that's what this bouquet of flowers is. A question that I'm also really excited about to ask other guests is what did you do last Wednesday? Because to be honest, every day is so different, and Wednesday is historically or notoriously the most boring day of the week. So I just want to know what people did last Wednesday. Me personally, I was sorting out the templates for editing this on Descript, which is the software that I use because, as I mentioned before, I'm a template babe. I like to put the work in up front so that I'm not a headless chicken later. So that's what I was working on Wednesday, as well as in a fundraising workshop with Selena, who I mentioned earlier, who is a community extraordinaire. So that is what I did last Wednesday. And when it comes to things that just keep me sane, so personal policies, I would say I would repeat some themes that you've heard from me already in this video, audio podcast, depending on where you're consuming this. So I time box as much of my work as possible because otherwise I really struggle to do it. Payment up front where I can, because I work for myself and rent needs to be paid. So I've configured my packages in a way now where I can take most of the payment up front and it just works. And then also I'm relatively minimalist. So I don't like having a lot of different options for things, especially when it comes to clothes, or even I wear the same jewelry every day. Shout out to waterproof jewelry. It's actually a cute thing I do when I travel now. I collect rings and I add to my necklace stack. It's just cute. And then even with my earrings, I wear the same pair of hoops every day unless it's a special event. I tend to order from this site called Boho Moon, but it's also quite ritualistic, I would say. So let's say my earrings are falling out, then it's oh, it's a new hoop era. Also now very select perspective of things that I will consider doing for free, I actually took stock of all of my clients in Notion, and like, I kid you not, like only 10% were white men. And so the thing is, being in tech, I am surrounded by white men. But the thing is, they are not the people who tend to want to pay me. And so if you're putting me in front of an audience full of white men, they're going to think I'm really cool and add to the vibe of whatever the talk or conference is, but they're not going to pay me. And so there is just not business case for me to do that event for free, essentially, in terms of a workshop. I'm really interested in learning what other people's personal policies are, to be fair, because I feel like, especially if you're a solo business owner, you have to put boundaries in place. Otherwise, people will walk all over you, especially as a woman, because they are going to feel like they can. And someone's reaction to your boundaries should tell you everything that you need to know about that person, to be honest. And if they react badly, it's normally a projection on them not having boundaries themselves. So yeah. Now let's get into podcasts. So audio is my favorite way to consume information. I've learned so much from podcasts. And to be honest, there are some podcasts I love to listen to just because they're funny and it keeps me company during the day. I hope this podcast can honestly be a mixture of the two. So starting with my favorite business podcast, you've got the Techish podcast with Michael and Abadesi, who I actually used to work for. They make tech really accessible. There's the WGSN Create Tomorrow podcast, I think it's called, but really actionable marketing insights. It's fascinating. There's the Freelance Friday podcast by Latasha James. Not So CEO, which is another interview podcast based in the States, but just like very real, very down to earth. And then finally, the Naked Beauty podcast by Brooke Tavard. She interviews figures about their lives and their journeys and also their relationship to beauty. She's had some of my favorite people on as guests. So Elaine Welteroth was just on there, as well as Law Roach. So those are my favorite business podcasts that I will like always run to tune into. Then there's my personal development podcast, because I need pep talks. I need pep talks. Two personal development podcasts that I would recommend are Too Smart for This by Alexis Barber, who actually inspired me to have my own personal policies in the first place, as well as Because I Love You by Bria Jones. What I love about Bria's content is they verge on the line of like tough love and giving yourself a break. Like, she does not sugarcoat things at all. Her content on YouTube as well as audio wise have really motivated me to just like kick my butt into gear. So when it comes to design thinking and deep dives on just like stuff, I love a deep dive. We have deep dives by Flex Mummy, which is great. Sustain This, which is about how we can consume fashion more sustainably and intentionally. Sounds Like a Cult. We'll do a deep dive on like the cult of Stanley Cups, or the cult of Disney, or the cult of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I love it when someone does a bunch of research, honestly. And Too Niche is a similar podcast to that. They also have a Substack where they post all the recs from the episode. I think my favorite Too Niche episode was the one about sparkling water. They were rating different sparkling water, and I just found that really fascinating. Finally, A-Hole Design, which is actually an interior design podcast. It's really interesting to hear about their perspectives on design and pop culture and how the two merged, essentially. And finally, the category of girly pop podcast. So sometimes I just like to laugh, okay? I need a sassy takedown on pop culture, and my two favorite podcasts for that are Let Me Say This by Peyton Dix and Hunter Harris. It is hilarious. That is my nail painting podcast every Saturday morning. I'm actually subscribed to Hunter Harris's Hung Up Substack. I'm a paid subscriber at that, and she's just hilarious. And then also Giggly Squad, which is just like the name suggests, it is just giggly. In terms of like what I put on my skin, I am a very minimal beauty babe. I really don't do too much when it comes to my skin. Yes, I put on SPF every day. I love to habit stack, so I actually have SPF in my primer. Actually, I think it's the e.l.f. dupe of Supergoop. I cannot remember what it's called right now, but other than that, I don't really do anything else other than like wash my face and smothering my face in shea butter. If it was good enough for my ancestors, like it's good enough for me, you know? And then when it comes to hair, I always like to start with a good foundation. I am very overdue for a haircut right now. I have curly hair, 3C, 3B. If you dabble in hair types, but I like to get my hair cut in Deptford at a place called Kink by Nature. I can generally get away with most shampoo, conditioner combos. I haven't found any that have been completely life-changing, and the same goes for leave-in conditioners. And as long as the base is good, I think I can generally get away with most things. But the thing that has changed my life, the K18 leave-in treatment, if you know, has completely changed my hair. I kid you not. My hair used to be in a slick back bun for maybe 3 to 4 out of like 67 days of a wash cycle, and now it's only in a slick back bun for maybe 2 of those. So if you want to sponsor this in the future, I will not say no. We love things that make our lives easier. I don't know if this is a beauty routine that makes my life easier, but I'm obsessed with laser hair removal, especially on my bikini line. It has changed my life. I will keep giving those people my money. If you have trouble with ingrowns or pigmentation or anything in that area, just get laser hair removal. You just got to commit to it, but it will change your life. Like, I'm even considering taking swimming lessons now, because that was a barrier that was stopping me. We've talked about my favorite podcasts, my favorite like beauty things, everything from waterproof jewelry to being obsessed with K18. In terms of my favorite tech tools that just save my butt, well, I'm a Notion consultant, so Notion is obviously up there. I use Notion for almost everything. My website is run in Notion, all my client portals are in Notion, all my operations and project management and planning this podcast, like everything is on Notion. And then in terms of design tools that help me edit, I am, like most of you, a Canva girly. And then for video and podcast editing, I'm obsessed with Descript. It essentially lets you edit your video like a Word document and also creates clips for social media automatically for you. When it comes to sharing on social media, people always ask me, like, how do you post so much? Well, the answer is this little tool called repurpose.io. It is incredible. So most of my content flows start out actually on TikTok. And as long as those TikToks are tagged with certain things, they get pushed out to certain channels. So my Twitter, my LinkedIn, my various Instagrams, essentially, and with a custom like ending. So for LinkedIn, let's say I tagged something with Notion or podcast, it will shoot that video out to LinkedIn with the caption, but then put a custom footer at the bottom of it, like, hey, if you want to sign up to my newsletter, like, go here. If you want to work with me, go here, essentially. And it's just been an absolute life saver. Like, I tell so many people about this and they're like, yes, this has also changed my life. So those are the tools that are really kind of changing my life and allowing me to level up and not completely burn out. If I had to choose a personal investment that has changed my life, it would 100% be laser hair removal. If I had to choose the best work investment, it would 100% be repurpose.io, because ain't nobody got time for that. I am starting to play around with Metricool at the moment for scheduling like TikTok videos and the combined inboxes across channels. Still yet to see if I like it or not. I might use another scheduler down the line, but we will see. I'm really interested to hear from guests down the line what all of their different like business and life survival tools are. And I'm really excited that in the guide, the Coffee and Oysters guide, again, available in the show notes, you'll be able to just click onto their profile and see what they use. So let's say you are a photographer, you can find another photographer in the directory and be like, okay, how do they get through life? And just like click on their page and essentially steal their stack, which is pretty cool. Because we're all having these conversations, but again, no one is writing this down. So and then when it comes to navigating London for me, I'm technically a London newbie. I've lived here full time for a year, but I've been up and down for about 5 now. So I live in Southeast London. So most of my recommendations will be like south, east, or central, essentially. But in terms of things on my London bucket list, I really want to see The Lion King. I should have that planned for Christmas. I'm very excited. Will probably be the only time that I enter central London around the Christmas period, because if you know, you know, it is an absolute hellscape. In terms of food spots, I know a Leon chicken nugget. It's to see me coming. They are the best chicken nuggets on the market, and if you are coming home late at night at London Bridge, Leon is pretty much the only thing open, and they are not necessarily bad for you, and they are delicious. So in terms of like big chains, Leon, you will always be famous. But in terms of like more indie spots for food, I love Nandine in Camberwell for more like Middle Eastern food. It's so good. And as well as Casa de Frango, which is a Portuguese micro chain, I will call it. Yes, a micro chain. Like there are only a few of them, and they're only in London. For pizza, there is a little hole in the wall. I think it's literally called Napoli Pizza, like near Old Street. And that is the best pizza in London. It is so good. Like the guy who owns it is so nice as well. A few pounds a slice, but it's proper pizza. And I always find myself buying a slice when I walk past it. Do I go out in London? Not really. I mostly go to networking. Wow, I sound sad. I mostly go to networking events, to be honest, and gigs, whether that's like DJ gigs or like live music artists. I think the last gig I went to was Tanner Adele, and the next gig I have coming up is a Raven Lene in November. And if you like Soulful House or Bossa Nova, actually I'm going to a gig at Jumbany in Peckham by my partner on the 8th of November. It's free, so come on down. That is my kind of going out per se, but I don't really go out that often, to be honest. I just prefer like co-working days. Like that is my social life. Co-working days, networking events. But to be honest, I think there's something to be said about being an entrepreneur in London. A lot of your friends do also end up being business owners. You're all busy, and the way that you can hang out is by meeting up for a co-working day. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm actually a member of a co-working space in Hoxton/Shoreditch called Shoreditch Exchange. I just really value being able to go back to the same place and like know the people there and like have free coffee. And if we're having a bit more of like a casual meet, I think I have like 1 day a month at the Curve Club in Old Street, which is a bit more like casual, as like bringing in guests to my co-working space can get like complicated sometimes, but I can have up to 3 guests at Curve Club. I feel like if you're really serious about the member club thing in London, if you even want to go down that route, you've just got to create a pod, and each of you have got to get a membership at different places and then just all be guests of each other, essentially. And then my favorite place for just like casual meetups is hands down the Grind in London Bridge. It's such a central point for everyone to get to. You can like chill there with your laptop all day. No one's really gonna bother you like that, as long as you just like order a coffee every now and again. And if you're hungry later in the evening, they do have food options as well. Events that I make sure I go to. Annually, I really make an effort to go to Black Tech Fest. 100% an event that you should go to if you are a Black tech professional, either a service provider or someone looking to get hired, as well as Direct to Culture, which is actually an amazing event targeted at mainly Black-owned D2C brands. The insights from the talks, they were incredibly tangible. Some things that I'm working on in my business currently. It sounds crazy, but I've been doing this for 5 years, but I generally don't sign contracts. I know there are templates and things online, but I think my business was in such flux that there was never a contract that fully fit. And luckily, I tend to only attract nice people, so it's never been a problem. They pay me and they get amazing work in return. But as my business scales, I should have some contracts in place. So that is what I'm working on. Another area in my business that I'm working on at the moment is learning automation. And so I can automate at maybe like an intermediate level. So automating within Notion itself, as well as no-code tools like Zapier, or Make. My favorite at the moment actually being relay.io, which is really easy to use and doesn't look super scary. But I would love to be able to do really complex automations myself. My favorite automation that I built for myself recently was actually every time that a new Calendly appointment comes through that's paid, it automatically adds itself to my Notion project database, as well as creates an invoice in my invoice Notion database and attaches the two together. And it also finds the correct client to connect everything to. I was doing that before myself manually, so this new automation has kind of changed my life and made me a bit hooked on wanting to get even better at them, to be honest. It's all good and well to talk about the future, but I also, on this podcast, want to stay really grateful for the present. And so in terms of things that I'm proud of myself for right now, it's starting this podcast. Like, I made a TikTok that went viral, I would say 6 weeks ago, suggesting, they're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had a podcast that was like business and lifestyle for London business babes? And everyone was like, yes. So it kind of got to the point where it gathered so much interest, but I was like, oh, I guess I actually have to do this now. But I didn't fully grasp all of the things it takes to start a podcast, just like figuring out the tech of it all, the outline of it all, the templates of it all. Like, that is so much work on top of me already pivoting my like Notion business. Figuring out how to start a new podcast was like a lot of work. And so it took maybe a few weeks longer than I thought it would take to get here. But I am so proud that you are listening to this right now. And I'm really excited for what's next to come. And one of our pillars in the manifesto is also shouting out people in the timeline. So in terms of other people that I'm proud, I would have to shout out Jazz from Babes on Waves, which is a member community that I'm also part of myself. Essentially, there was a retreat that happened and it sold out essentially just through email. The date had to move, lots of people cancelled, and then she had to kind of recruit from scratch again, which is obviously a lot harder. But she did it. So you go, girl, if you're listening to this. And would 100% recommend Babes on Waves if you're looking for a business network in London, especially as a woman of colour. Thank you so much for listening to this first episode of Coffee and Oysters. I am so glad that you even made it this far. Obviously, I want this podcast to grow. So if you want to share this with a friend, I would be grateful. I am actually so excited for this journey. As I mentioned, 100,000 of you just in London, not even global audience, that I feel could really benefit. If you want to never miss an episode, please subscribe to the Substack, as well as following us on Coffee and Oysters Pod on Instagram and TikTok. And if you are a Notion babe that needs Notion help, please do not suffer in silence. Please hit me up for Notion expertise and sign up for the Academy. The next one is Thursday on October the 24th. But you can find all of this information in the Coffee and Oysters guide in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead, and see you for the next episode.